There's 100 or so days of summer vacation when he comes home just to end it. Classes problems, writing data, and finding a good way to make it. Like maybe Elliot, you and our famous director, or Patrick running on the Zoom. Kate and Eric making the cuts, or Peyton holding up the boom. Saying cooking vibes, making the stuff, or Walker mixing the board. Griffin doing sports, Seth saying words, or making our teacher record. Anyway, that's all of the crew, and we hope you all enjoy.
Good morning, Alaska. My name is Griffin.
And my name is Seth, and today is March 16th, 2022.
A ConocoPhillips natural gas pipeline is still leaking near the North Slope community of Nuckwest. ConocoPhillips says the leak causes no danger to the community. The Russian invasion of Ukraine is now in its third week, with continued destruction of residential areas leading to international condemnation. Ukraine has put up stiff resistance, preventing Russia from taking any of the country's major cities. Now over to Elliot on Zoom.
Thank you, Griffin. Good morning, Dr. Johnson, Mr. Claymore, and Dr. Allman. It is so good to see you guys on Zoom this morning. We'll start with Dr. Johnson as we usually do. Do you have any updates for us?
Good morning, Elliot. It's great to see you all, and we missed last week, and I'm absolutely 100% confident I miss you guys more than you miss me when we don't get to connect. So, thank you for being here this morning. I guess one update is that I would say to you all is you probably heard yesterday there's a new revenue forecast, which means the state is predicting how much money it's going to take in, and the first time in years and years the state has a surplus. In other words, more money than it's planning to necessarily need for the budget. But what do you think the big question is going to be when the state has 3.4 billion more dollars than it thought it was going to get? What's the big question going to be?
Would it be about the PDF the PDF, the permanent fund?
Generally, yeah, the big question's how they gonna spend it. I think that's the question everybody will ask, but I want to encourage you and all the students that make this show possible, because I believe in you that when people ask you how we're going to spend all that money, I want you to be the leaders and say, before we ask how and give our opinions, I think the big question for our state today is how are we going to work together to come up with a plan to spend the money? Because everybody has a plan, has an opinion on what to do with the money. But our problem has been we haven't been able to get everybody to agree on a plan and implement it. And so you guys do that every day in school, in sports. You figure out how to work together and come up with a plan and execute it. And I think that's the big question for our state today is now that we have more money than we thought, how are we going to work together and spend it in a really wise, smart way? So if somebody asks you what to do with all that money, I want you to say, tell me how we're going to work together to spend that money.
I like it. It's always, I think, especially this last year and all of the fun events that have happened the last couple of years, I think we've really learned to work together, and hopefully we can use that knowledge to work on the spending bill.
Right. And just for before I have to sign off, Elliot, and I'll just say, to any of your teachers that are listening, Mr. Butterfield or whatever, like it doesn't start with blaming. Like you don't blame people for leaving things in other states or whatever might happen. You just you give everybody due credit. So Elliot, it wasn't your fault. That's what I'm saying. It wasn't your fault.
It is good to hear. There might be some other people in here, but I won't start blaming after that. Thank you. Mr. Claymire, do you have any updates for us?
Good morning. Thank you. Hope everybody had a good spring break last week and energized, ready for the final push to the end of the year. I appreciate the commissioner's comments. That is the number one question. How are we going to work together to agree to find what I think ought to be a sustainable revenue plan? But I'm going to go a step further and say that part of that absolutely has to address the spending for schools. NEA Alaska has started a a promotion. We're trying to capitalize on the Red for Ed movement that you have seen around the state in past years and around the country. And we're at about midway through the legislative session, and we haven't seen a whole lot of things pass. And in fact, there are a slew of bills out there to deal with education, some of them more positive than others. But we have started a push. A part of it is how to spend that money. We do have an opinion there, but also just hoping that the legislature can focus on a couple priorities. If they can't get it all passed, these are the things that we would like to see done. We want to see the pre-K and reading bill come to some conclusion. That's one of the bills that has stalled in the legislature because of disagreements. And so we're hoping that the legislature can come together and get that. We've been working on that for several years. The legislature's been working on it for several years. Obviously, as educators, we've been interested in that. We think that that's good for our students. And so we're hoping that is no longer delayed. Secondly, more tied to the revenue forecast, we would really like to see the funding for schools fixed. That's House Bill 272 and 273 that would really address what we've been calling flat funding to really tie the funding source for schools to inflation. And so we do hope that that's part of the final solution. And then finally, because of the recruitment and retention factor, House Bill 220 or whatever replacement, because there are discussions around that. We're not tied to a particular bill, but it addresses retirement and providing some stability and a respectable and stable retirement for our educators. And so we feel like those three issues have to be addressed. And we're hoping that the legislature can come together and focus on those. And we're looking forward to being part of that conversation and that solution.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of really great things happening in the legislative sessions. Thank you for your time, Dr. Johnson. Very busy man there, has to head over to another meeting. So again, I want to thank all of you guys for your time, but also with that, I'm gonna hand it over to Dr. Allman. I know Diamond just had their version of SoBoss, and I know we're having our version of SoBoss here in a couple of weeks, along with a lot of other things. But do you have any updates for us?
Yeah, I guess I'll grab onto that, Elliot, and just say that I think probably like most principals, no matter the level of school, we're starting to hopefully enjoy more of the normal rituals that we would each spring. For us, that means having an indoor field day. If you're a watcher out there who doesn't get the SoBoss acronym, it's also called WACO, several other places in the Anchorage School District. I think we're also looking forward to prom, graduation, senior fun days, yearbooks, all those rites of passage that are really important to students. And of course, there's different rites of passage at lower levels, but it's starting to feel a little bit more normal. And I just hope we can kind of continue on that momentum. And then I think the only other thing I would say is just to try to synthesize what Dr. Johnson and Mr. Kleinmeyer said. I was reminded just how much impact groups of people can have when they work together and they're like-minded. I got to spend about an hour and a half last night with a handful of teachers, counselors, program leads, and support staff at South High School. And I was lucky to get to sit aside and watch those people just explain what they do, and was impressed just by what is possible when you have a group of like-minded people working toward a common goal. So we can do that, obviously, at the state level and at every level below it. We are probably better off. And since I can't leave anything without a good quote, I read a book by Steven Pinker. Maybe the commissioner will see this later. So if the commissioner's not read Rationality, pick that book up. It's a good one. Here's a quote from the preface. "None of us thinking alone is rational enough to consistently come to sound conclusions. Rationality emerges from a community of reasoners who spot each other's fallacies." So I guess I would just leave you with the thought that we need to be open-minded to a wide range of ideas while also holding firm to our beliefs and being willing to adjust when the facts adjust so that we can hopefully get good outcomes for everyone. Have a good week otherwise.
All right, that is definitely a really good quote to hear. I've not heard that one. So thank you guys again, both, for coming in and spending this time with us. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Seth for sports.
Elliot, good morning, Alaska. Today for sports, this week, the Anchorage Wolverines bounced back to win second of a 3-game home set. Also, the other day, Brent Sass won the 2022 Iditarod. And finally, big shout out to all you high school skiers who participated in the state high school competition. That's all for sports this week. Back to you, Griffin.
Yeah, thanks, Seth. I think that's all we got for you guys today. If you have any questions, remember to submit those at southfolk.com and follow us on Instagram at SAHS The Den. And as always, remember to
Keep your claws sharp, Wolverines.